trip around the world, the dream of every man, woman, and child. Back in the old days, Marco Polo did it the hard way. Here's the story of a modern Marco Polo. The Kingdom of the Sea. Your guide is Colonel John D. Craig, author, explorer, adventurer, himself a veteran traveler of the highways and byways of the world. Your host and fellow wanderer, Bob Stevenson.
There's a very famous ship called the Yankee. She's a beautiful brigantine which sails every 2 years from the harbor of Gloucester, Massachusetts, on a journey round the world. The Yankee is owned by Commander Irving Johnson, and the passengers on this glorious voyage are a selected handful of students from all parts of the United States. It's indeed high adventure on the high seas. And here to keep us on course is an old friend of Commander Johnson, our man of the sea, Colonel John D. Craig.
Thank you, Bob. Can you imagine an amateur crew of college boys and girls being entrusted with the sailing of a 96-foot brigantine around the world, touching at 108 ports, and for the most part visiting out-of-the-way places? Well, that happens only in dreams. But it was a very real dream for Johnny Little of San Gabriel, California. He signed aboard the Yankee as one of 17 students to sail the boisterous Atlantic and the sunny Pacific. It won't take long to get the feel of the wind-filled sail, so let's cast off and be underway. This beautiful brigantine sails each year from Gloucester, Massachusetts on a journey around the world. And the passengers on this glorious voyage are a select handful of students from all parts of the United States and Canada. The Yankee formerly was a North Sea pilot schooner, converted to a brigantine by Commander Irvin Johnson, who created this idea of round-the-world student cruises.
That's a beautiful ship. How long is she?
She's about 97 feet long, Bob, large enough for the needs of her 23 passengers. There's the skipper, Commander Johnson. He plays pranks on the novice helmsman. He put a magnet right next to the binnacle which offset the compass so much that the poor lad had a hard time keeping on course.
Well, that's not an easy job. Does everybody take a turn at the wheel?
Yes, it's all part of their training. Each had an hour a day at the wheel. The Panama Canal was the first port, and this was their first chance to wash clothes and take baths. Plenty of fresh water, so the boys and girls brought out their linen, and they had the rigging dressed like a laundry.
How many girls were there aboard, Colonel?
4 girls and 19 boys on the cruise, all students. Also, there was a professional sailor, the first mate, and a doctor, a cook, and Mrs. Johnson. From the canal, they headed out into the blue Pacific toward the Galapagos Islands, and the skipper on the yard there sighted a safe passage through the small channels to a safe anchorage at South Bay. It's a very beautiful spot. They went ashore here, took a look at the local inhabitants, and found that the animals and the birds were not at all afraid of man. In fact, they could walk right up to some of them. Mother Seal with the little baby ignored the visitors, and she's trying to coax Junior to go into the water for his first swim.
Junior doesn't look too eager, does he?
In the Galapagos, they found these giant tortoises. These creatures were gathered many years ago by whalers for food.
Are they getting pretty rare down there, Colonel?
Well, they're only found way back in the mountains in the grassy valleys. And they're also protected now by the Ecuadorian government. There were sharks all around the ship. Here's one they were able to catch.
I don't suppose they went swimming in those waters then, did they, Colonel?
Well, Johnny Little and his buddy tried it once, but they were chased out of the water by 2 big hammerheads.
I'm surprised the skipper let them go in at all.
Well, he didn't find out. I don't think he knew it at the moment. But the swimmers found out on short order. That's a pretty good-sized shark. He could scare anyone. There's a chain ahead of that hook. His teeth are very sharp. He could bite through an ordinary line. And they caught turtles, too. These are quite plentiful. They kept some aboard alive.
What did they plan to do with them?
Well, eventually they ate them, Bob. You know, turtles are very good eating. They make excellent soup and turtle steaks. Even turtle liver is delicious. Penguins live down here. Little penguins that have come on the Humboldt Current all the way from Antarctica. That's a very cold current, not very pleasant to swim in, but the penguins liked it.
Isn't the equator a rather strange place to find penguins?
Yes, that's true, Bob, but there's so many strange things about these islands. They brought some of the penguins aboard and added them to the local zoo, which included seals and goats and several other pets. Near one island, way out, they found a pod of whales.
A pod of whales?
That's right, a school, a herd. Whalers call them a pod. They put a boat over the side and went after them. These were sperm whales, once very valued for their oil. This is the first time these lads had a chance to harpoon anything big, so they pick on a whale.
Oh, to be young again, foolhardy.
It must have taken quite a bit of daredevil to go out there in that small boat with nothing but a hand harpoon. The only difference between them and the old-time Nantucket whaler is that they have an outboard motor.
Bet they didn't realize what they were letting themselves in for.
I guess they were just hoping. Finally, they caught up with a whale, and wham, they drove that harpoon home. Well, it took off, and those lads had a regular Nantucket sleigh ride, the whale pulling them along 5 to 6 knots. It slashed around for quite some time. Eventually, it took out all their line. They got some of it back, and then the whale turned and actually rammed the boat.
How big a whale is that, Colonel?
It's just a baby whale, just about 20 feet long, but he's still quite a handful. After a long struggle, he quieted down. They finally got him back to the Yankee. They hauled him up alongside, and they had whale steak for dinner that night. In the case or the head of the sperm whale, there's some very valuable oil, some of the finest oil obtainable. So they used it to oil their watches.
Seems to me it'd be easier to have it done in a jewelry store, Colonel.
But leaving the Galapagos, they headed for that island so celebrated in the movies, Pitcairn, where they encountered some of the descendants of the mutiny on the Bounty crew.
That's a romantic place. I wonder if they ever saw the movie.
Oh, I'm sure they must have. Every time the Yankee pulls offshore here, the skipper brings presents and supplies from the States. They all love Skipper Johnson, and they all love the visit of the Yankee. Coming in through the surf is a real thrill. There's never a calm day here. Always there's some surf. And these people will risk any size surf. 10-foot, 20-foot high breakers don't deter them a bit.
I've heard that they were some of the finest boatmen in the world.
That certainly is true, although this really is a calm day by comparison, and they didn't have a chance to prove it.
How often do boats visit Pitcairn?
Oh, every month or so. The islanders like to trade with them. They visit the boat. It affords them a meager living. The Yankee crew stayed on the island for about 10 days, and they're now headed back to the ship. It's a real ride through the surf, and they're not going to forget that one for a long time. There are great numbers of cormorants here because there are lots of fish at sea, and the cormorant is a great fisherman. In Japan, they train these birds to go fishing. They put a ring around their neck and toss them overboard. They go down, catch a fish. When they come up, the fisherman takes the fish away from them. Every 10th fish they're permitted to swallow, so they won't get discouraged. Some of the members were divers, and they were very anxious to gather specimens of fish undersea, that they would spear fish. It would not be difficult to collect these fish. They did collect great numbers of them here, and strangely enough, they discovered that 60 to 70% of the fish they speared were toxic in some form or another. Seals would come in and chase the fish away. Of course, these divers were working in different places along the coast, so when the seals were bothering one diver, the other diver had good shooting.
Do you think those seals were self-appointed guardians or just jealous?
No, I think they were fascinated with the bubbles coming from the diver's gear. The scuba gear makes a little noise, and the seals can hear that underwater. Seals are very graceful swimmers. Watch this one. He does slow rolls and corkscrew turns. Seals can stay underwater about 20 minutes on a dive. They seem to be having a wonderful time. They're certainly in their element underwater. They always dreamed about the South Seas, and now they're on their way to Tahiti, rolling down through the southeast trades. The sea becomes very beautiful, a symphony of blue.
How did they work their watches, Colonel?
Oh, it was the usual watch, 4 hours on, 8 off. But not at the wheel, they learned to navigate. They had other duties too, such as painting and keeping the boat shipshape.
Don't mean to tell me the girls painted too.
Well, there's your answer. The girls did everything the boys did except go aloft. They helped work the sails from the deck, though. The skipper had everyone aboard learn something about the ship. I think the majority of those youngsters learned enough of seamanship on this one voyage to be able to take out their own boat. When the weather was good, the bosun's chair was lowered alongside the ship, and the crew would take turns riding it, having a splash bath, they called it, while the ship was traveling at 8 or 9 knots.
Seems to me that'd be a pretty dangerous way to take a bath.
Well, one time Johnny lost his shorts, and that's the closest he came to an accident. But even the girls tried it. Finally, they made Tahiti, and every boat set out for the reef. As they came in through the pass, beautiful breakers would roll on either side. Little outrigger canoes make that passage all the time, so it can't be too dangerous. And these outriggers float on practically no water at all, just 2 or 3 inches. They fairly fly across the water. They traveled all through the South Pacific and touched many interesting islands on this cruise. And once they visited a real Samoan village. This woman is making her noonday meal, poi. They pound it until it becomes like gray paste.
Boy, that's a lot of poi.
Well, they needed a lot because they were invited to a party. And the chief came out to greet the visitors. Now, this wedding mat is made by a woman for her wedding bed. They don't make them anymore, so this is a rare item. And here they are with the chief, and so the chief toasted them.
What are they drinking, Colonel?
Calla juice, they sometimes call it. It's their local wine. But only the chief drank it. The native girls dance the hula. This is the local or Hawaiian type hula with hand gestures and graceful step movements. To the Polynesians, the hula is a story told in pantomime and song. And this one is the Tahitian hula, a little more hip movement. Heading across the 7 seas westward to more islands and more adventures, with all sail set now and with the clowns alongside, they had many pleasant days. The clowns, of course, are the porpoise. You'll find them all through the South Pacific. At times they followed the ship for days on end. But when the wind came up, the Yankee put on more sail, and she sped ahead and left them astern.
I noticed the boys are working up there in the rigging.
Yes, and girls too, occasionally. By this time, the girls like to go aloft once in a while, too. But they bent on more sail, and they were fairly flying on this leg of the cruise. Notice that painting on the top gallant there. That's the skipper's private insignia. They next head for Uji Island in the Solomon Group, and here they witnessed a dance put on by the native Christian school. Now, this is a traditional dance of these people. They wore the same traditional costume they used to wear long before Christian missionaries ever visited this island. Part of the dance is symbolic, a hunter hunting a bird. And in their dance, they also have clowns, and these are the clowns. In New Guinea, they headed inland to Chinbu. This is on a highway built entirely by hand by thousands of natives. Actually, they carved this highway out with their bare hands using just a few picks and shovels.
Sort of a New Guinea freeway, huh? They're actually carrying dirt by hand, aren't they?
That's just what they're doing, Pop, actually carrying it by hand. They built every inch of this road by hand. They were all dressed up for it, too. Following the highway, they came upon these natives all dressed up in their prettiest feathers and shells, and these people were on their way to a colossal sing-sing. At this local sing-sing, they danced for hours. No rhyme or reason about it. They just liked to dance. You might say these are the wild men of Borneo, so often advertised in circuses years ago. They're not very far removed from the Stone Age. But those are beautiful bird of paradise plumes. Soon the cruise heads west again, and Christmas came at sea, so they held their celebration right on board ship.
How did they ever manage to get all those fancy packages aboard?
Some of them were taken aboard at the time of sailing, and others were picked up along the route. They saved them all for this occasion. And they try and provide them all the comforts of home while they're at sea like this. And after the Christmas dinner, they all came on deck with full stomachs to watch the sunset. All but this die-hard nibbling on the turkey bones. Coming into Bangkok, the city of temples, they sailed right up the river and they tied up at a dock. Bangkok is a city of Kongs. They're just jam-packed with sampans.
I don't believe I've ever seen a Kong. At least not up close. What is it?
Kongs are little streams, sort of canals. And most of the business is transacted on these Kongs, trading from little boats.
Well, they picked up quite a crowd there.
Sure did. They also are noted for very beautiful dancing. The Siamese are graceful people, and their dancing is most distinctive. These are the temple dancers, originally sponsored by the King of Siam. The court dancers put on a special performance for the members of the Yankee crew. Brocaded silk gowns or traditional dresses. After leaving Bangkok, the Yankees sailed south for Bali, the land of rice paddies. Here they also saw some dancers, somewhat similar to the Siamese dancers. This man is performing a tabiak. It's danced to the music of the gamelan orchestra.
Did you say that's a man?
Yes, Bob. He's portraying a woman. That's very common here. He's probably spent most of his lifetime learning this dance. But when he reaches the ripe old age of 18, he'll be too old for this dancing, and so he'll have to go to work in the rice fields.
Imagine being too old for anything at 18.
Under the snows of Kilimanjaro, they had one of their dreams come true. They saw wild animals running wild on the veldt. So here they are now on the last lap on the way home. All the boys went aloft to set more sail to speed that long run back to Gloucester.
You know, I'll bet some of them are not too anxious for that cruise to end.
Well, that may be right, Bob, but the skipper maintains one strict schedule. He may arrive at any part of the world at any time, but when he returns home, he plans to arrive back in Gloucester 18 months to the minute from the time they sailed. So it's full sails to the wind, and they're really speeding along here.
How many feet of sail does she carry, Colonel?
7,775 square feet. That's when she's fully rigged. And she sails with a bone in her teeth at about 13 knots. She's really flying now. And after that long run across the Atlantic, they finally came to Gloucester. And there offshore, they were met by some outboard motorboats. Thousands of people lined up along the docks to greet them. There were bands on hand and all the relatives. And so right on the dot at 2 p.m., as scheduled by the skipper, they were home. Home are the sailors, home from the sea.
Please thank John Little for sharing with us that delightful globe-girdling cruise on the beautiful Yankee. Wouldn't it be great to be a student again, Colonel? Join that crew. Just imagine the stories those young people will have to tell on their return. Strange people, odd places.
Well, Bob, you don't have to go that far to enjoy the sea. A smaller will can serve that purpose, but there are a few do's and don'ts that Zale Perry will point out for us in a moment. With millions of people turning to sea sports for recreation, here are a few do's and don'ts to get the most fun out of motorboating. After selecting the boat best suited for your needs, the first item is to make sure you have life preserver and a fire extinguisher that works. Your cruising speed should always be within the limits of safety, which depends on a number of factors such as amount of traffic, presence of water skiers, and local regulations. Special care should be exercised not to overload a boat or to place oneself in a precarious position. In the event of a skier in the water, a hand signal gives the alert to all concerned. And as a real safety provision in case of motor failure, a good substantial paddle is a must, to say nothing of a pair of strong arms.
Zale certainly knows her way around the 7 seas. You know, she'd have no problems even if she were cast ashore on a desert island.
It's strange that you should mention that, except that it's written in the script. Because our next adventure deals with a couple of interesting beachcombers. We'll follow them to a remote spot where the currents of the vast Pacific pick up all sorts of flotsam and wash it ashore at places where man seldom visits. We're going to visit a beachcomber's paradise. We'll dive in mysterious waters. We'll find rocks that float. We'll even go marlin fishing in a rowboat.
That should be something to see. Speaking for Colonel Craig, Zale Perry, and our sponsor, this is your host, Bob Stevenson, thanking you, ladies and gentlemen, and inviting you to join us again on a spree with beachcombers on The Kingdom of the Sea.